up on this Wednesday edition of Newsline at noon, the U.S. government slaps a $500,000 fine on Asiana Airlines for failing to properly assist family members of passengers on a flight that crashed last July in San Francisco. Despite the government's drive to make domestic demand the main driver of economic growth, Korean consumers are reluctant to spend more, with consumer sentiment falling in February for the first time in 5 months. Plus, with no immediate prospects of striking a security deal, U.S. President Barack Obama tells his Afghan counterpart that all American troops may withdraw from Afghanistan by the end of the year. These stories and more on Newsline at noon. Thanks for joining us. You're watching Newsline at noon. I'm Chae Yusan in Seoul.
Very good to have you with us. I'm Mark Broom. Regulators in the United States have fined Korea's Asiana Airlines $500,000 for failing to help the families of victims of last July's crash at San Francisco's main airport. Our Kim Ji-yeon has the details.
Federal transportation officials in the United States slapped a $500,000 fine on Asiana Airlines for failing to take good care of the family members of passengers on a flight that crashed last July at San Francisco International Airport. The fine is the first against an airline under a U.S. law that requires prompt and generous assistance to the relatives of crash victims. The U.S. Department of Transportation said it took 5 days to reach the families of all 291 passengers. The agency said Asiana lacked translators and staff that were trained in crash response. In an email to the Associated Press, an Asiana official said the company fully supported the families of the passengers right after the crash and will continue to support them. 3 people were killed and scores injured last July when Asiana Flight 214, a Boeing 777, clipped a seawall and crashed while attempting to land at San Francisco's main airport. The U.S. National Transportation Safety Board is still investigating the main cause of the crash, including whether there were defects to the plane and negligence on the part of the pilots. The probe results are expected to be announced by July. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
Balancing record-breaking exports with greater domestic activity is a key economic objective of President Park, and the government has put together a detailed plan to reinvigorate the housing market as the first concrete step to boost demand. Finance Minister Hyun Oh-seok told a meeting of economy-related ministers on Wednesday that there is an urgent need to stabilize skyrocketing housing rent fees to allow consumers to spend more on other things. To control prices in Korea's traditional rental system called jeonse, the government will make sure some 500,000 new homes will be built over the next 3 years. The government will also offer low-interest loans totaling 11 trillion won, or roughly $10 billion, to new home buyers to ease their burden. It'll also draw up tailored plans for people seeking to rent their home on a monthly basis.
Korean consumers' confidence in the economy edged down in February from the previous month as uncertainties linger, despite an overall improvement in economic activity.
And this comes after President Park on Tuesday vowed to boost domestic demand in her 3-year economic plan. Our Connie Kim reports.
Korea's Consumer Sentiment Index, a gauge of consumers' overall economic outlook, living conditions, and future spending, dipped for the first time in 5 months in February. The Bank of Korea says the index came in at 108 this month, down 1 point from January, when it hit an almost 3-year high. It isn't all doom and gloom, however, as the reading, which is above 100, still means optimists outnumber pessimists. That said, consumers feeling less confident of the economy could raise red flags about future growth at a time when President Park is pushing to create more balance between domestic demand and exports. The president stated as much Tuesday when she laid out her 3-year economic innovation plan.
기초가 튼튼한 경제, 역동적인 혁신 경제, 내수 수출 균형 경제 등 3대 핵심 전략을 제가 임기 내내 직접 챙기면서 강력하게 추진해서 성공적으로 이끌어 갈 것입니다.
The Bank of Korea says February's consumer sentiment figure was largely due to consumers not being able to feel the economic recovery in their everyday lives. The sub-index measuring medical expenses and housing expenses dropped 2 points and 1 point respectively in February. In order to achieve the president's targeted economic growth of 4% by 2017, all eyes are fixed on whether the government has the right measures in place to boost flagging domestic demand. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
The Korean government will provide a bundle of incentives for Korean companies operating overseas that are looking to return to the domestic market. The Industry Ministry says it will select 20 so-called Uturn firms next month as part of efforts to stimulate investment and create jobs. The move follows a set of support measures for such firms that went into effect in December of last year. The first batch of companies will be chosen from China, Bangladesh and Cambodia. A number of firms are choosing to return to Korea as they are losing their cost-cutting edge due to rising labour costs. The so-called Uturn firms will be able to receive discounts on land rental prices, capital investment support and tax deductions.
Korean companies, meanwhile, are increasingly investing more in the U.S. state of California and, in particular, Los Angeles.
Yes, and link-ups between firms here and in LA have given the city a much-needed boost. For more details on this, we're going to connect live to our Hwang Jie in Los Angeles. Jie.
Guys, I'm at the site of the future Wilshire Ground, which is a 73-story building packed with offices, retail outlets, and hotel rooms. When it opens in 2017, it will be the tallest building in the city and the first major skyscraper built in the city in more than 20 years. The company behind the project is Hyundai Group, the giant, the shipping and airline giant.
It symbolizes Korea's commitment to the region. It shows the energy and excitement that is emerging in downtown LA.
LA Mayor Eric Garcetti says the building has already given the local economy a boost.
It's a $1 billion investment in Los Angeles, creating 11,500 construction jobs. But we will have 1,750 permanent jobs when they finish their work as well. So I thank everybody who brought this day together, who made this day possible.
And many other Korean companies like CJ Hyundai and Samsung are also taking part in boosting LA's local economy. According to a report by the Los Angeles County Economic Development Corporation, Korea is ranked as one of the top sources of foreign investment in LA County. California United Terminals, a subsidiary of Hyundai Merchant Marine that operates out of the Port of Los Angeles, has plans to develop a new terminal while it has already invested tens of millions of dollars.
We made direct investment in the equipment needed, and the exact amount will exceed $100 million.
Ferdinando Guerra, an economist at the Los Angeles County Economic Development Corporation, says the free trade agreement between Korea and the U.S. is allowing even more Korean capital to flow into the city.
Increased two-way trade. As a result of that, we will also see an increase in foreign direct investment, particularly, obviously going both ways.
Barriers to investments remain, but Guerra says that he expects Korean companies to pump up even more money into the local economy, given the area's huge Korean-American consumer base. Guys?
Well, thank you very much, Jie, for that report. That was our Hwang Jie reporting live from Los Angeles on the ever-increasing trade between the city and Korea.
For your fill of Korean and international news. Join Chae Yu-sun and Mark Broom every weekday at lunchtime. Newsline at noon.
Plenary session this Wednesday and vote on the government restructuring bills.
South Korea says the time is ripe to seek dialogue for inter-Korean reunification as neighboring countries are increasingly coming round to the idea of a unified Korea. Speaking at a dinner marking President Park's first year in office Tuesday, Foreign Minister Yoon Byung-se said Chinese President Xi Jinping endorsed a unified Korea at last year's summit with President Park. He also said Russian President Vladimir Putin has expressed his thoughts on Korea's future role as a stronger, unified country. Minister Yoon attributed the changing attitudes to President Park's diplomatic efforts and trust-building policies, including her so-called Eurasia Initiative, which aims to boost economic cooperation with North Korea and Russia.
The nominee to serve as the next U.S. Deputy Defense Secretary says North Korea is highly likely to launch more provocations. In the clearest hint yet, Washington's North Korea policy will remain the same for the foreseeable future. During a confirmation hearing at the Senate Armed Services Committee Tuesday, Robert Work pointed to a strong possibility of more provocations by the North as its leader Kim Jong-un looks to tighten his grip on power. Work said Kim remains in full control of the regime and is consolidating power. He added North Korea's weapons of mass destruction and the regime's proliferation activities are a direct and serious threat to the United States and its allies in the region.
Pyongyang remains tight-lipped over South Korea's offer to help the North deal with an outbreak of foot and mouth disease in pigs. Seoul's Unification Ministry says Pyongyang has not yet responded through the inter-Korean channel at the border village of Panmunjom. The ministry proposed talks with North Korea earlier this week to discuss what would be the South's first humanitarian assistance to the North in well over 3 years. Radio Free Asia, meanwhile, reports Pyongyang has asked the United Nations Food Agency for help in wiping out foot and mouth disease. The North's state news agency reported last week that the foot and mouth disease has infected over 3,000 animals.
The Korean Navy has signed a multi-million-dollar contract with a major U.S. defense contractor to buy advanced radar-controlled gun systems. Raytheon says the Korean Navy will pay $123 million for 9 FANLAX systems. FANLAX is a rapid-fire, computer-controlled radar and 20mm gun system that automatically acquires, tracks and destroys enemy threats. Under the direct commercial sale, Raytheon will deliver the systems between 2016 and 2022.
Solar energy is said by some and hoped by many to be the future of renewable energy for the world.
It certainly is, and work on solar-related technology has been ongoing at a leading institute here in Korea, and researchers there have recently completed a high-tech facility that utilizes the sun's rays to grow crops indoors. Paul Lee reports.
Rows upon rows of leafy vegetables are being grown here, from crispy Napa cabbage to fresh lettuce. At first glance, it may appear to be a small laboratory experiment, but this is actually a fully functional factory. The state-of-the-art facility uses solar power as its key energy source, which generates electricity for LED and fluorescent lines in this tightly controlled environment.
The pH of the culture medium or the electrical conduction can be automatically controlled. The light intensity and quality can also be automated from a control unit as part of the operation of this plant.
Researchers from the Chuncheongbuk-do Agricultural Research and Extension Services say this is the future of farming. Almost every factor from the temperature and humidity to the nutrients is scientifically monitored and regulated. Being indoors also means that any crop can be grown all year round without the need for pesticides.
We're selecting functional plant cultivation techniques that are effective in growing mass crops. We are then taking these specialized cultivation technologies and developing a packaged product.
Though the initial costs are high, the Agricultural Research Institute says the solar-based cultivation system will be a commercial success in the long run, as it allows farmers and their crops to weather any storm or natural disaster from inside. Paul Yi, Arirang News.
Korea's Olympic squad returned home on Tuesday to a hero's welcome. Some came home sporting medals, but all came back to a country that greatly appreciates their efforts.
Yes, our Song Ji-sun went out to welcome the athletes and the Olympic flag as the countdown to Pyeongchang 2018 begins.
Home sweet home. Whether returning with medals or without them on Tuesday, all the Korean athletes were welcomed with cheers from home fans after landing at Incheon Airport.
We returned from Sochi with 8 medals overall. We finished in 13th place in the medal count, falling short of our initial goal of being in the top 10. But all the athletes gave it their best, especially the female Olympians.
The underachievement could have been disappointing, considering the efforts input over the past 4 years. But figure skater Kim Yeon-ah is content, despite winning silver in an event many believe she should have won gold in.
I'm just glad that it's all over now and that I was able to show all that I prepared through the tough times. I still can't believe it's all over now.
And those that made a successful debut are already picturing themselves at the next games.
I'm grateful I won medals of all colors. I want to prepare well over the next 4 years and do even better at Pyeongchang.
The Olympic flag from Sochi was also on board the same plane as the athletes and will call the provincial office of Pyeongchang its new home starting later this week.
The run-up to Pyeongchang has begun. All eyes are now on us, and we study everything from Sochi. We will showcase Korea, a developed country now, 3 decades after hosting the Seoul Summer Games in 1988.
Both the winter sports athletes and the Pyeongchang organizing committee came back from Sochi with some lessons learned about how to host some memorable games and make the state at home their own. Song Ji-sun, Arirang News, Incheon.
The World Health Organization has expressed concern about the long-term implications of air pollution in the Chinese capital, Beijing.
The WHO is calling for immediate action to alleviate the toxic heavy smog that has been choking the city for the past week or so. Our Connie Lee reports.
You can barely see it, but the city of Beijing is there, under a thick blanket of smog. It's the 6th day in a row of hazardous pollution in the city, and now the World Health Organization has called Chinese smog a crisis.
We are very concerned, and we have to see this as a crisis. A crisis means that we need to take immediate action to protect ourselves.
Chinese environmental inspection teams have been dispatched to 12 factories nationwide, and there are reports that authorities have shut down or fined certain factories for not following pollution regulations. Pollution levels in Beijing are above 450 on an air quality index. That's 9 times the level deemed safe for humans. Beijing has been under an orange alert since Monday, the city's second highest warning level. Residents are being asked to wear masks or stay indoors, and hospitals are reportedly crowded with patients suffering from respiratory problems. Children and older citizens are more susceptible to breathing problems, and the smog makes people cough a lot too. If and when the pollution alert reaches the highest warning level, drivers will only be allowed on the road on alternate days based on their license plate numbers, and schools will be shut down. Meanwhile, meteorologists say that cold air coming from the north is expected to decrease smog levels in China starting Wednesday night, which could, in turn, also lessen the fine dust and smog coming into Korea. Connie Lee, Arirang News.
Hello everyone, I'm Kwon So-ah. Let's take a look at what's making headlines around the world. U.S. President Barack Obama has threatened to withdraw all U.S. troops from Afghanistan by the end of the year if a crucial security pact is not signed. At the same time, Obama also held out the possibility of waiting his counterpart out and signing the agreement with the next government in Kabul after elections in April. Son Jung-in reports.
The Obama administration said Tuesday that time is running out, and if the Afghan leader continues to refuse to sign a bilateral security agreement, it will withdraw all U.S. troops from the country by December. In their first phone call since June, Obama told Afghan President Hamid Karzai that the U.S. plans to move forward with the contingency plan since the Afghan leader is unwilling to sign the security agreement that would give the U.S. military a legal basis for staying in the country. U.S. Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel has voiced his support for the move and confirmed for the first time the Pentagon was making detailed plans for a full withdrawal. Obama also said in his phone call with Karzai, however, that he is open to the possibility of a post-2014 training and anti-terror mission with the next government in Kabul after the April election. The Pentagon is currently planning to cut the American force in Afghanistan to as low as 20,000 from the current 33,000 by midsummer, giving commanders the ability to pull all troops out by December 31st if no agreement is reached. The prospect of a full American withdrawal has led to concern among Afghanistan's neighbors, most notably Pakistan, where officials have warned that a civil war could break out and further destabilize the region without continued U.S. assistance. 손정인, Arirang News.
Ukraine's interim president Alexander Turchinov has raised concerns about separatism in the country's Russian-speaking regions after formation of a unity government was delayed to Thursday. Turchinov said he would discuss the issue with law enforcement agencies and was later quoted saying that those found guilty of separatist acts would be punished. The Ukrainian parliament, meanwhile, has voted to take ousted President Viktor Yanukovych, whose whereabouts are still unknown, to the International Criminal Court for causing the deaths of more than 100 anti-government protesters. The ICC Public Affairs Unit, however, said it did not receive a request from Ukraine and added the ICC cannot investigate specific individuals for a state. Turkey's Prime Minister Recep Tayyip Erdogan is facing calls for his resignation following the latest revelation in a larger corruption scandal. Turkey's main opposition party and demonstrators that gathered in the streets of Istanbul on Tuesday demand that the Prime Minister step down after audio recordings he has denounced as fake were posted online. The recordings appear to capture a conversation between him and his son about ways to hide huge amounts of money. The Prime Minister says the recordings, which have been viewed by more than 2 million people on YouTube, were fabricated and constitute a treacherous attack. Erdogan has been in his post for 11 years. The Eurozone's economy is gradually recovering, and the economic growth rate for 2014 is expected to reach 1.2%. The European Commission said Tuesday that's 0.1 percentage point faster than a forecast made at the end of last year. Germany, the Eurozone's biggest economy, is especially expected to contribute in the growth at 1.8%. The second and third biggest economies, France and Italy, will lag behind at 1 and 0.6% respectively. Mt. Gox, once the world's biggest trading platform for the virtual currency Bitcoin, abruptly halted all of its transactions on Tuesday, raising concerns among users and prompting questions about the future of Bitcoin itself. The Mt. Gox website and Twitter accounts went blank, and its Japan-based office was empty. All Mt. Gox's chief executive said by way of explanation was that the business was at a turning point. Meanwhile, the CEO of Mt. Gox resigned on Sunday, and the company stopped withdrawals from its trading accounts weeks ago to protect itself from cyber attacks.
Good afternoon. Well, we'll continue to have a stretch of mild condition today, but the toxic smog from China will continue to blanket the Korean peninsula. And this afternoon, we have rain in the forecast for the southern part of the country. Jeju will get up to 80 millimeters of rainfall, and southern coast will receive about 10 to 40 millimeters, and the rest of the country should have 5 to 20 millimeters of rainfall. But all the rain should let up sometime early tomorrow morning. Now, this round of shower is expected to remove most of the dust from the air for the southern provinces, but not here in the central region. So the central part of the country will continue to experience high levels of fine and ultra-fine dust particles throughout the day. So let's try to stay indoors and take a dust mask before heading out. Please keep that in mind, and here are the readings for today. The afternoon high in Seoul will get up to 14, and the high in Daegu and Gwangju, Busan will all top top out at 11 this afternoon. Now let's see how other regions are looking. It looks like Jeju will climb up to 12, Daejeon will rise to 14, while the top temperature on Mount Kumgang will be at -1. Now that's all for me today, and hope you have a wonderful rest of the day.
And that just about does it for today. Those are the stories we're following at this hour.
Join us again for the latest on the day's headlines in our next newscast at 2 p.m. Korea time. Join us tomorrow for Newsline at Noon.